Hey, so this is the video for the aquaculture affirmative, which is the affirmative in the JV packet. So aquaculture is sort of an interesting affirmative because unlike a lot of other affirmatives, it deals a lot with a lot of different kind of scientific questions. So it deals with the science of agriculture and the science of food production and the science of food change and how all of these things sort of interact and work. So the big distinction with aquaculture that I think is the most important part of this affirmative is the distinction between fisheries and aquaculture. So right now the United States produces a large proportion of its fish, the vast majority of it, 98% of it, through fisheries. And fisheries are basically the way you might think about producing fish, which is you get a big fishing boat or whatever, you go out in the ocean, you get a big net, and in a process called trawling, you use the net to grab all the fish in the ocean, you throw them into the boat, you process them, and then you have fish on your plate or whatever. The problem with fisheries, a lot of people say, is that they're not sustainable. And sustainability is a really important word because that just means, can you keep doing that over and over again, sort of indefinitely? So if we kept doing fisheries for the next 50 years, would there still be fish in the ocean? Would we be able to continue doing that fishing practice? And because fish populations have declined so much because of overfishing, people say that fisheries are not a sustainable way to produce fish. So that leads people to think of more sustainable alternatives. And one alternative that people have come up with to produce fish is aquaculture. So aquaculture, people will call it fish farming, or even fish factory farming. So you can see the picture of the factory here. And although it's not literally a factory, it's still in the ocean. It has some characteristics of sort of a farm as opposed to just going out in the ocean and swiping up fish or whatever. So aquaculture basically means you would have a small, sort of finite amount of water, and in that water you would have some number of fish, and you would regulate the reproduction of that fish so that you would only be taking as much fish out of your aquaculture pen as are being reproduced all the time. So the idea with aquaculture is you can make sure that in your fish farm the number of fish aren't dropping too low and that you'll be able to sustainably produce fish for an indefinite period of time. And aquaculture is actually a really popular way to produce fish all over the world. It's just that the United States for the most part has not been using aquaculture. So what the plan does is it has the federal government, the United States federal government, will issue permits for aquaculture development. And there are some articles that say that this would increase the amount of aquaculture that we do and cause a big shift over from fisheries to aquaculture. So what's the benefit to all of this? The main benefit that the articles talk about has to do with food production. So right now there are 7 billion people around the world, and in a couple decades there's going to be about 10 billion people. So one big question that people are thinking about a lot is how are you going to produce enough food to feed all of those 10 billion people? And right now a lot of people rely on fish. So there's about 2 billion people, all of this is in the articles, who rely on fish for a large amount of their protein. So in order to sort of have a nutritious balance of your diet, you need some amount of protein, and that can come from beans or soy or meat or fish. And a lot of people who live in coastal regions are really dependent on fish for a lot of their protein. So there's a lot of people who say that if we want to be able to feed either the 7 billion people on Earth now or 10 billion people a couple decades from now, we're going to need a lot more fish than we have now, and we can't let fish keep declining in the way that they're currently declining as a result of fisheries. We can't keep overfishing the way that we've been doing in the past. So there's an article in the packet, it's written by, I think his name is Lester Brown, and he makes the argument that if we don't have more food production, not only will a lot of people not have food, will be malnourished, but also that will cause a lot of different kinds of conflicts. So political conflicts, possibly wars, because people feel like they won't have access to enough resources, and that will cause conflict over those resources. So that's the basic idea of the aquaculture affirmative. If you want to learn more about it, the best thing to do is always look through the articles, look through the 1AC, and just kind of get a sense for the breadth of the arguments that are in there.